have researched dozens of world maps and found these 30 to explain everything. For example, this one will change the way you view the world. These are countries divided into three groups based on their biggest trading partners, whether they trade most with Germany, China, or the USA. But this map is totally wrong. In reality, these data are from 1990. If we fast forward to today, the situation has radically changed. China's popularity rapidly grew, especially in the developing regions. The USA was left behind, now trading mostly with the closest countries. Meanwhile, Germany is keeping its European market, but it is very unlikely that it will overcome China anywhere else. Well, the huge growth in trade has its dark side, and it's really dark. Just look at this map showing the CO2 emissions. In other words, the darker the country is, the more it is polluting our planet. China is clearly the biggest polluter of them all, but now hold your breath. It is emitting 33% of the world's CO2 pollution. That is absolutely crazy. In comparison, the USA is a big polluter too, but its 13% is still almost 3 times less. In another perspective, China is emitting more CO2 than these 185 countries together. I need to emphasize that we are talking about all of them together. In one way, it just makes sense that you would create more pollution in places that are so densely populated as China or India. This map shows the population density around the world. I mean, how could you create any pollution in a country like Mongolia, where only 2 people share every square kilometer, making it the most sparsely populated country in the world? On the other side of the spectrum is Bangladesh, one of the most densely populated countries in the world. In this tiny land, you have to share every square kilometer with another 1,268 people. That technically leaves you with 0.8 square meters for yourself. In fact, if we draw a circle about this size on this exact place on the world map, it would contain half of the world's population. I mean, look how huge Earth's surface is in comparison to this tiny circle, and still more than 4 billion people call this place home. Another way to put this is by splitting our world into the following 10 sections. Each of them now contains 10% of the world's population. America is very sparsely populated on a global scale, comparing this huge section with the super tiny ones in Asia. The same is true for Oceania, as that continent makes up only 0.5% of the total global population. However, if you would like to know what the future will look like, this map is the answer. It shows the average birth rates in each country. The darker the color, the faster the population growth. Straight away, you can see that Asia is not the leading region anymore. Indeed, Asian countries are growing at the same pace as most of the American countries. The huge population growth is taking place all over Africa these days. Niger is the fastest growing one, with a growth of 4% every year, which means more than 1 million babies with its only 25 million population. Meanwhile, Europe is slowly going extinct, with many of its countries having negative population growth. LVA, as the worst of them all, is shrinking by 1% every year. The following map is a reality check. This is the Global Hunger Index. A darker color means a higher percentage of people facing life-threatening hunger. The most heartbreaking part is the realization of how much this map correlates with the previous one. Countries with the youngest populations are also the ones with the biggest food shortages. Nevertheless, the world is a much better place than we sometimes believe. Check this out. This is what the hunger map looked like 20 years ago. It was significantly worse than it is now. You can see how much closer we go to a possible solution to the global hunger issue. Even though there is a lot of positive progress taking place everywhere, our world remains a complicated and somewhere cruel place to live. These are all the countries with an ongoing war on their territory. The Ukrainian-Russian war in Europe has already been going on for 2 years. Meanwhile, Latin America still remains the place of cartel fighting, and Africa is far from stability. Many reasons are behind the civil wars and terrorist activity in most African nations. Yemen, Syria, and Myanmar are still caught in the middle of a civil war. Factors like war or hunger are among many directly affecting how long you will live. These are countries sorted by their average life expectancy. People living in the darkest ones are expected to live the longest lives. Japan is the winner. If you are born there, chances are you will live 84 years on average. Sadly, this map reflects even more the bad situation in Africa. If you were born in Chad or Nigeria, your life is expected to last around 52 years. That is a 32-year difference from Japan, which is really unfair. Question: do you believe that the more money a country has, the higher the life expectancy will be? Well, the answer is, it depends. These are the countries sorted by their nominal GDP. For sure, there is some level of correlation between this one and the previous map, especially in the US, Western Europe, and Australia. However, you can also spot some truly rich countries like Indonesia, Russia, India, or Brazil with quite poor life expectancies. I guess the wealth of a country is not the same everywhere for its citizens. A good argument of why some countries with high GDP still remain relatively poor is GDP per capita. In theory, it shows that although India has the same wealth as the UK, it just has to split it between 1.4 billion people, mainly because of the crazy high population. Most of the South and Southeast Asian countries are at the lowest ranks regarding GDP per capita. However, Africa is in an even worse place. According to the IMF, the poorest country in the world is Burundi. It's estimated that the GDP per capita there is only $246. Could you imagine surviving a whole year with only $246? Coming next is the corruption index. A corrupted country could negatively influence the distribution of its wealth to the citizens. In Europe, we can see the transition from not corrupted West to slightly corrupted East. In Asia, the situation is far more complicated. Besides a few exceptions like Japan, South Korea, Bhutan, or United Arab Emirates, most of the countries are quite corrupted. The same situation is in Africa and South America, although a few countries seem to have functioning, legitimate governments. The next map could further help us understand the overall political freedom around the world. These are the most and least democratic countries. While some of the most corrupt countries seem to have at least a functioning democracy, but that's not true for others. China, North Korea, Afghanistan, Belarus, Venezuela, and big parts of Africa and Asia are far from being democratic. Regimes in these countries are mostly authoritarian, with a limited or non-existent right to vote for their leader. At the end of the day, what is the most important thing you need to live a happy life? I would say it's definitely peace. The darkest blue countries on this map are the most peaceful in the world. On the contrary, the red ones are nothing close to peace. Europe is the most non-violent region in the world, while in Asia it depends on where you look. The southeastern part of the continent is mostly avoiding violence, which is not true for South Asia, and especially the Middle East. There they are still a long way from a peaceful life. In America and Africa, the situation varies from country to country. Can you guess what this map shows? It depicts the world's most prevalent religions. Christianity dominates America, Europe, Oceania, and Southern Africa, with 2.4 billion followers. Islam, slightly smaller, dominates North Africa, the Middle East, and Central Asia. Further east, Hinduism and Buddhism are dominant. Some countries follow folk religions or are irreligious. Lastly, Judaism is only a majority in Israel, with 15 million followers worldwide. Thanks for staying this far. Subscribe for more.